element means which elements are inevitable. So if some programming language or some program you are demanding as an object-oriented programming, you should have incorporated the properties of the major elements. So what are the major elements we are having here? Abstraction, the concept of abstraction you have to incorporate. The concept of encapsulation you have to incorporate. Then there should be modularity and hierarchy. So these are the four inevitable things that you have to incorporate in a programming when you're calling it an object-oriented program. And the object-oriented model is a way to construct new objects from pre-existing objects. So here comes the very essence of object orientation. So something is there. From that, you're modifying that into another new thing. Okay. So some pre-existing object will be there. We will be modifying that object to form a new object. So that is the very essence of object-oriented programming. And that is what the object-oriented model will do. So the major elements are abstraction, encapsulation, modularity, and hierarchy. And there are minor elements also, which if they are present in your programming, so it will be better to model with the object orientation. But if they're not present, then also you cannot deny that the language is object-oriented programming. Okay, so what are the minor elements you're having here? The typing, then concurrency, and persistence. So these are the three things which we are calling the minor elements. So let us get into them. Let us start with the major element. The concept of abstraction, it has already been discussed in the previous class. So what is an abstraction? When somebody is viewing a thing, an object from outside, so what is happening inside, that is not known to him. So for example, I have given like when you are driving a car, you are seeing that car as a whole. So it is an object. But how the car is being driven, what is the purpose of the engine, how the different parts are working to run the car. So these things are not known to you, and you are also not interested about it. Who are interested? The mechanics are interested. But when the mechanics are interested, the mechanic who is only changing the brakes or mobilizing the parts, so he is only interested in those portions. Who is the mechanic of who is making or repairing the engine? So he is only interested in the engine part. So we are only concentrating on what we are interested on. So that is the way of abstraction. And in object-oriented programming, the level of abstraction is very important as we work in a hierarchy. So see, I'm calling the fourth criteria or fourth element here, that is the hierarchy. Without the hierarchy, object-oriented programming cannot be done. Why? Because in the beginning of the object-oriented programming, we divide the things, we divide the problem into a number of segments or modules. So here comes the modularity. So here comes our third property. So when we are discussing the abstraction, at the same time, we are discussing about the hierarchy. At the same time, we are discussing about the modularity. So as the system is an abstract system, it has to be divided into a number of modules. And when a team is working on the module, that team will not interfere in the other modules. So that comes to the modularity. And when you are incorporating all the modules together to form a system, so that is the hierarchy. So the interrelated modules, you are clubbing them together to make the next level of hierarchy. And in that way, it will go on. Like in the previous class, we discussed about CAC-A and CAC-B data structures, or sorry, databases are made, which are clubbed together to make the database of CAC department. And individually, you have driven the IT department database as well as AEIE department database. And when you are clubbing all of them together, so you are going to get the HITK database. So this is the hierarchy you are maintaining over there. And these small things, this AEI module, this IT module, this CAC-A and CAC-B modules, these are the modularity. And where is the abstraction? When you are in the top level, when you are in this level of the HITK, you only see that the HITK is a wholesome database which is having every data about the HITK. You do not know how the underneath modules are basically working to make that database available to all of us. Okay, so that is the level of abstraction. When you are in the top level, you are not interested in any of the bottom level, how they're working. When you are in any of the bottom level, you are interested in your level. You don't know what the peer levels are doing, or you don't know what the underneath level, how the underneath levels are working to get your level working as well. Okay, so that is the level of abstraction. And encapsulation is a process of compartmentalizing the elements of an abstraction that constitutes its structure and behavior. So I told you, encapsulation means you are basically making a sack, and inside the sack you are packing all the important things that you are going to need for making the object. Okay, so to make the object, what are the required things? What are the things you will require to make the object? Attributes and behavior. So these attributes and behavior you are packing together to make one module, to make one encapsulated object. So that is the essence of encapsulation. Obviously, when you are working with modularity, this encapsulation part also becomes inevitable. So all these four elements are interrelated with each other. If you have abstraction, you have to make a hierarchy. When you are making a hierarchy, there should be modularity. To make the module working properly, you need to have the encapsulation. So these are the four major elements, and without any of them, you cannot say that particular programming language or that particular object, that particular design is an object-oriented design. Okay? Now, let us go for the minor elements. So these three are the minor elements we were talking about. These are not inevitable, but if these are present in that particular programming, so the programming aspect improves. So what are these? The typing. Typing means there are two different types of languages. One is called the strongly typed language, another is called the weakly typed language. Basically, data type. Some languages require to define the data type prior to using that particular variable. Like in C, you have to declare the data first, then you can use it. In Java also the same technique will happen. You have to declare the data. You have to declare the data type first, then you can use the variable. Like if you're using somewhere this. So prior to this, you have to write this. So we call this a declaration, and this is mandatory for a strongly typed data. Okay. Now there are some language which are weakly typed language. Basically, when you're utilizing some variable on that particular time, the type of the utilization decides what type of data it is. Suppose you are writing this particular statement without having the declaration. Then, which type of data this A can be? What should be the data type of A? Or just forget about it. If I write this, so what is the data type of A? What do you think? Anyone? What is the data type?
Integer.
Integer. But without this, if you write, what is the data type?
Cat data type.
String data type. Okay.
Yeah.
So there is a data type used in C as well as Java. So this is the string data type. The same variable if you write, so it is going to be a float or double type of data. So obviously through the usage, you are deciding which type of data it is. So in some of the languages, we can do that without having any kind of a declaration. Even if we can declare the data like var A, Var A means A is a variable. You do not know what type of variable it is. Okay, so var A is a declaration. In JavaScript, it will happen. Okay, there are other languages which support this kind of a declaration, var A. Without having the var A declaration, your program will run as well. So how it will decide which type of data it is? With the usage. Okay. So when you are trying to keep some integer data, you decide, the compiler or interpreter, whatever it is using, that will decide that it is an integer type of variable. So completely dependent on the usage of the variable type has been decided. So that is called the weakly typed language. Java and C are the strongly typed language. JavaScript is a weakly typed language. You have more and more different number of languages. Try to find out which type of language they are. Okay, so this is called the typing. Now, even if the language is not a strongly typed language, you cannot say that it will never have any kind of object-oriented property. So nothing depends on that. Okay. Now, afterwards, but one thing is important when you are working with the class object hierarchy. So when you are creating a class, obviously you have to, when you are using an object, obviously you have to instantiate a class. So that is how the object is a typing of the class. It is a typed data of the class. Okay. So that's how the object orientation is supported by the strongly typing. For that purpose, the strongly typing is required. Otherwise, you may go for any of the weakly typing. After that, it comes to concurrency. Concurrency means in object-oriented environment, there are active and inactive objects. Some of the objects may be active, some of the objects may be dormant or may be dangling. Okay. In C or C++, you may be hearing about the dangling pointer. So that kind of a thing, which data cannot be reached, but you have memory allocation for that. So active and inactive, both kind of objects are there. Okay. Now, when the objects are working, there is a phenomena that the objects may run parallelly. If you are working in a single processor environment, then there will be a time sharing system, so that when one object will be working, the other object should stop. If you are working in a multiprocessor environment, then for each of the processor, one object can work. Okay. Now, how the object is working? Object is working through process. You know that obviously that when a program is in execution, we call it a process. So without having a process, the program cannot execute. But how we are going to create parallel processes under a single process? So in that particular case, what will happen? There are threads. Under a single process, multiple threads are going to be created, and these threads are basically parallel things. So they can be allocated parallelly. They can execute parallelly. So when one object is working on one thread, the other objects may work on the other thread. Okay, so this is how the Java supports concurrency. Not only Java, which language may be having the concept of the thread, so they can support the concurrency. Okay, but the concurrency is not inevitable. If a object-oriented programming has got all the major elements present inside it, but it is not supporting concurrency, still it will be object-oriented. Okay. After that, the third element is the persistence. An object occupies a memory space and exists for a particular period of time. So how it is happening?
मैम
हेलो
हेलो मैम, कुछ समझ नहीं आ रहा है ऑब्जेक्ट एक्टिव इनएक्टिव। मैम कुछ समझ नहीं आ रहा है।
ऑब्जेक्ट एक्टिव एंड इनएक्टिव, अच्छा ठीक है। So if you have a class and you are instantiating a class, forget about the class. When you have an integer kind of a variable, int a you are writing. So when you write int a, that means for that A variable, you have some memory space where you're going to keep the data about that A. The same thing happens when you create an object. We'll come to that afterwards, obviously. When you create an object, you have some memory allocation for it because the object is having some internal variables. In the previous class, we discussed about the object like one particular Maruti car with a green color, with a number plate having a number of WB, ABCD, EFGH. So this is a particular car, this is a particular object. Another car with a Hyundai make and having a red color and some different value in the license plate. So these are the particular objects. These cars are the particular objects. But when you categorize them as a car, so that will be the concept about the car, how the car is made. Basically, what are the things you need to notify, what are the attributes you have to notify to understand the car? The color of the car, the make of the car, the license number of the car. So these are the attributes. These values will change for each and every object. Okay. And there will be some number of functions or methods using which the cars will behave, how they are being driven, how they will stop, how they are having their music system. So these things are the internal functionalities. So functionalities are represented by the functions or methods. So together, the behavior and the attributes makes a class. And for every class, you can instantiate it any number of times. Each time you instantiate it means you are making one object. Like if you put the values for the color of the car as green, the make of the car as Maruti, and other things you are also putting them together. So that will make one particular car. So that is the object. And the design of the car means the attribute names, the functionalities, all these things together, the design thing together will make the class. So when you are creating an object, obviously you have some attributes and you have to keep the value of the attribute. So when you are creating the object, the attributes are being saved inside the memory. So they will be having some memory allocation. Now, every object has got their own memory allocation where they are going to keep the data about themselves. So active objects are those who are being used right now. So they are linked properly. They are linked with the program. The program can access the data. The program can modify the data. So they are the active object. But some inactive objects are also there, which are no more in use, but they are not revoked from the memory. The memory address is already being them with them, and they are having their value over there. But the program is not utilizing them. The program is not linked with that memory location. So we will call them inactive object. But forget about the inactive object. Just get into the active object. Active objects can run parallelly or they cannot. How you can run programs parallelly? So if you have a single processor system, you can use the time sharing environment. First time slot is provided to program number 1. Second time slot is provided to program number 2. In that way, every program will get some slot of time, and after execution of that program will stop execution and it will be going into a cyclic way. Okay. So if you have the timeline like this, and if you segregate the timeline into equal time quantums, so the first quantum may be going to the first job, second quantum is going to job 2, and third is going to job 3. So after that, again the next quantum will go to job 1. Suppose you have these 3 jobs present. So in that way, in a cyclic order, it is called the round robin scheduling. In a cyclic order, the jobs can run parallelly. So this is one way. It will give a essence of parallel execution, but not exactly the things are running parallelly. But if you have multiple processors, so every job can get its own processor and can run parallelly. To execute a job, you need to have threads. And these are the threads which are basically running the objects parallelly. Each of the thread will be assigned with one object and they will run parallel. So that is how the concurrency can happen in a programming. So active objects have independent threads of control and they can execute concurrently with threads of other object. Okay. So if you have three threads, T1, T2 and T3, and if you have three objects to execute parallelly, so O1, O2, O3, so associate these three objects with three threads. Now they will be running parallelly with either single processor or multiprocessor system. Now that completely depends on them. We are not interested in that part right now. So object can run parallelly using individual threads. Okay, so that much you have to know right now. And that property is called the concurrency. Now, it is not inevitable for any object-oriented programming to have the concurrency. But if it is there, it is better, obviously. Now, after that, persistence. Persistence is the memory space and how much time you are going to keep the memory space for the object. I told you that to create any object, the attributes value you have to keep in the memory. So when you are creating an object, it is reserving some memory space to keep the attribute value. So every object is associated with a chunk of memory. So when the object is created, the chunk of memory is also created. Now, how long that chunk is going to be kept? Now, in some of the programming language, this chunk only resides with the program till the end of the program. When the program is exiting, the chunk of the memory is also exited. So in some other programs, it may happen that this chunk is going to stay with you only up to the function module. Okay, so if you call from here, in traditional programming, the lifespan of an object was typically the lifespan of the executed program. That is the first case I was talking about. So the object's memory space will be kept till the end of the program. When the program will exit, it will also be revoked. The property by which an object continues to exist even after the creator ceased to exist is known as persistence. So if it can happen that after the creator program has exited, but the object is residing in the memory, it is sustaining in the memory. So that is called the persistence. Some of the programming language support that. Maybe those objects will go to the parent process which has created this. Somehow they have managed the mechanism to keep the objects, to keep the memory allocation of the objects even after the program completes. Okay. So you have decided, you have defined int a, you have used int a throughout your C program, and when you have completed it, when you have written return 0 and you are exiting from the program, still your int a value will be there in the memory. It is such kind of a concept. Okay. So this is called the persistence. Obviously, most of the programming language does not support to this, but some of the programming language can have the mechanism of persistence. Okay, so this is also coming into the minor element group. Now, as some of you do not know what is an object and how it is going to be made properly, when you start programming, you will get to know everything. For now, just see the concept and try to grab the concept. Now, here comes our major things, which are the object and class and their relationship. So, by definition, if you call, a class is a user-defined blueprint or prototype from which the objects are created. Numerous times I discussed about it. A class is a blueprint or prototype. It is a design from where we are going to make the object. The design will say what are the attributes the object will need. The design will say how the object is going to behave. And according to that, the objects are going to be made. It represents the set of properties or methods that are common to all object of one type, all object of that class type. Okay. So you just see this class template here. This class template. What we have here, the first is the class name. They named the class as circle. The data field, the radius is, we don't know what is the radius. This will depend on the different object. Now you are only defining the prototype. So the name of the class we have defined. The data value that you have to keep, the attribute is the radius, is the length of the radius. That also is here. Method, fetch area, that is you have to, how you are going to calculate the area, how you are going to calculate the perimeter, and how you are going to get the value of the present radius. So these are the three functions basically. Okay. So the first class name from here, basically this is the name class. The class name is circle, under which you have attribute radius. So let us write it like the structure we have written in the C programming, int r. So this is the radius, and say the area. Area function is here. Float. It will return float area. So how do you find the area? What is the formula for finding the area of a circle?
Pi r square.
Pi into r into r. That's it. So this way, two other such functions will be there. So this is a kind of a class. Okay. When you know the C programming, so you must be knowing the structure. In the structure, you have only the variables. Now, instead of the variable, you have some functions also to be present inside the class. Okay. So we have given a name to the class. We have listed down the attributes of the class. We have listed down the behavior of the class. Okay. So this is how the class is going to be defined. After that, after having the class, now you are going to define an object of the class, a circle which is having a radius of 5 centimeters. Got it? In the class, you do not know what is the variable r value is. Why? Because r will depend on the different objects. This is only the design. This is only the prototype. Now, when the prototype will actually exist, then you have to put proper values for the variables. Okay. So, one circle with a radius of 5 centimeters. There is another circle with the radius of 7 centimeters. So here r value will be 5, here r value will be 7. But will there be any difference in the area calculation? What do you think? For the radius equal to 5, which formula you are going to use to find out the area, will that differ for the radius value 7 circle?
No, ma'am.
No, it will not change. So the behaviors are not changing. All the circles should have the same kind of a behavior. So behaviors are used for multiple times by all the objects you are making under that particular class. What will change? Only the value of the attributes. So these are the states. Okay. Now you come to this. When you have the name of the object or name of the class, that is basically showing the identity. Using the name, you are identifying which class it is, which object it is. Suppose this object's name I am giving as C1. So this is the entity name. This is the identification property using which you are distinguishing between the two objects C1 and C2. You do not know what are the internal variable values. You cannot identify them from outside. Just by giving different names, you can identify the objects. So that is the identity. The names are the identity for both classes and objects. State. State is the data variable. What are the values of the variables that basically identifies the state of the particular object? Okay, so you can get to the example here. The circle object 1, the object name should be, oh, this is the name. So this is the identity, circle object 1. Now data field radius is 1. So a value you are putting. Suppose I'm changing the value like this. So in the circle object 2, you have the radius value of 10. Circle object 3, you have the radius value of 100. So these 3 circles are different from each other. This one is 10 times of the first one. The third one is 10 times of the second one. But they are unified in just one case. What it is? It is all of them are having the similar kind of features and they are following the similar kind of methodologies. So all of them are actually circles. Okay. All of us are human beings. We have different names. We have different identities, obviously. And the features of every one of us are different. If you get some attribute of us, so you will get different height, different weight, you will get different address, different phone number, different date of birth. So everything will change from each other. So all of us are the object of the humankind. Okay. So human is a class. From the human, we all are derived as objects. So object is instance of class and represents the real life entities. Classes are prototypes. They are not real life entities. But objects are real life entities. Okay. So for both of them, for all of them, state, behavior, and identities are important. So we discussed about what is an identity. Identity is the name. As simple as it is the name using which you can distinguish between the objects or distinguish between the classes. What is the state? A state is basically represented by the attributes and their values. Using the state, you can identify that this circle is different from that circle, or this human being is different from that human being. So these are the attribute values. And behavior. Behavior means following one single class, all the objects should follow the same kind of a behavior. And that behavior is going to be defined using methods. As here we have 3 methods like fetch area, fetch parameter, and fetch radius. So these 3 functions or these 3 methods, we will say in Java, these 3 methods are basically defining how the circles are going to behave. Okay, so these functions are called the behavior. So under the identity of a class or object, we have states, which is represented by the attributes, and we have behavior, which are reutilized by all the objects, and these are the functions or methods. Okay, so this is what a class and object is and how they are related with each other. So object class relationship, again you come to this. So you can see vehicle is a class. And under the vehicle, you have license number, fuel type, make and color. These 4 are the attributes, features. You can have different values for different variables. And what are the general property or behavior you are having here? The fuel amount, the capacity, the apply, brakes. Okay, so these are the function or methods that are followed by all the variables, all the vehicles. So vehicle being a class, vehicle 1, vehicle 2, vehicle 3, you just create 3 of the objects from here and give different value for all these parameters and they will be following the same kind of a behavior here. So that is the vehicle class. Now, if we go down there, you can see 3 different variables, 3 different subclasses are being created here. 3 different types of variables. Car type, bus type, and truck type. In these 3 are all of of them are the vehicles, but they have some difference between them. Like buses should have a route ID. They run on a particular route. Truck should have a capacity, like it is having a tonnage. How much ton should be carried by that particular truck? So that is the limit, and that is called the tonnage. Car. Suppose car is having a sunroof or not. So it is a Boolean variable. Sunroof, yes or no, you have to put here. So car, bus, and truck, these are the three different type of vehicles. What are the similar things? These are the similarities. All the car, all the buses, all the trucks will have these all values. But if one particular vehicle is a bus, it should have a route ID as well. So you are adding the extra special feature with this, and you are specifying a different class out of the vehicle class. So vehicle class is a general class. From there, we are going to derive another class which is a special type of variable, and it is having some extra features which is not present in any other such type of vehicle class. Similarly, car is also adding something here. Truck is also adding something here. So these three are being derived from the vehicle class. We call them subclasses. This car, bus, and truck, these are also classes, but the common features we have taken together as a vehicle class, and they are basically utilizing the common declaration into them, as well as they are adding their own feature. So we call them the derived class or subclass. These are called the derived class. This is the parent class. Now, why we should have this? We can directly declare car, bus, and truck, three different classes, and we can have all the properties listed down under it. Like car will be having license number, fuel type, make, color, and sunroof. Bus will be having license number, fuel type, make, color, and route ID. In that way, three different classes not interrelated with each other, we can do that. We can create that. But what will be the problem? Every time, which portion could be reutilized? This is a portion of the code which can be reutilized by all the three classes present over here. But in that case, if you just go for the car, bus, and truck classes which are not related with each other, in that case, you have to write the entire code again and again. It will be a just repetition. Okay. Instead, what we have done, the common features we have taken together in the vehicle class. After that, the subclasses are only adding their own. Some specific things they are adding. Park at home, drive to office, stop at station, charge fare. So these are the specific properties. These are the specific behaviors of the bus. The load goods, unload goods, these are the specific properties or behavior of the truck. So these we are going to add separately. Okay, we already have some prototype. We are adding our own things to the prototype to create our own prototype. Okay, like these things are already made in market. You just bring it and you add your own requirements inside it to get a proper class present. Okay, now when you instantiate this car class, means car 1, car 2. So what they are going to have? They are going to have all this license number, fuel type, make, color, and sunroof. All the variables will be present under it to define the state of the car. Different values should be present for car 1 and car 2. And they can call all the functions present in the vehicle as well as their specific function present in their own class. Okay. So this is actually what we discussed about it. This is called the inheritance. And this is a very important property which supports code reusability. And for object-oriented programming, code reusability is a very important thing. You cannot just repeat the codes again and again in different parts. If you can get some summary, keep it somewhere, and that could be derived into your own class whenever it is required. Okay. So this code reusability is very important. Here you are utilizing the codes. Here you have written a number of functions. These functions are equally available to all the three subclasses, all the three derived classes. Okay, so you need not to write the three functions again and again inside these three. What you have to write, which is specific for the derived classes, that you have to add up. Okay, so in this inheritance hierarchy, of the class, when you go from the down to up, so this is called the generalization. So between the car, bus and truck, you get the general properties together, and that is making the vehicle. Okay, how the vehicle class is made? By getting extracted the general properties of car, bus and truck. So that is the essence when you are going from bottom to upward. Okay, so that is generalization. And the concept of specialization comes when you have the parent class and you are deriving some class out of it, and you are adding up the special features like this. Okay, so you have the general features already written inside. Now when you are deriving the class, you just have to write the special features about them, and you will be getting the class ready for you. Okay, so when you are going bottom to up, so it is the general, this feature is called the generalization. And when you are going from top to bottom, then it is called the feature of specialization. Okay, and all these two features are present in inheritance property. Now, when you call about the inheritance means vehicle. Under vehicle you have car, under this you have bus, under this you have truck. So we call this inheritance, as well as we call this is a property, is a relationship. Car is a vehicle, bus is a vehicle, truck is a vehicle. So this is called the is a relationship. Okay, so there are different kind of relationship between the object and classes being made in the object oriented programming. One of them is a relationship. We can have is a, we can have has a, we can have part of. So these are the different kind of relationship that we have in the class level. Okay, so is a relationship, the example of is a relationship is the inheritance. Why? We have already discussed. Okay, now aggregation, association and composition. These are also these three things are also representing the relationship between the objects and classes. Is a, has a and part of. These three relationships are coming under these purviews. Okay, so association is the global representation of the class relationship. One class is associated with the other class. How it is associated, we are not going to that detail. One class is having some kind of association with the other class. Maybe it is a part of, maybe it is a, maybe it is has a. Okay, either of the properties are there, but the classes are associated. So that is being the global phenomenon. Okay, under that there comes aggregation. Aggregation means one class is related with, is having some relation with the other class, but they are not dependent for their existence. Okay, so the student class is present, the department class is also present. But if a particular student is not into a department, that department will not have any problem for that. If a particular student is leaving the department and going to some other department, it will never change anything about the department. Similarly, when the when one student is changing the department, that will never hamper the existence of the student as well. Okay, so this is the relationship we'll call aggregation. They are related, but they are not dependent on each other for their existence. So that is aggregation, some kind of amalgamation. Okay, and composition. Composition is when the amalgamation is very strict, when one kind of object is a part of another kind of object, when one class is a part of another class. Like books are having pages. So page class and book class, they are basically making the composition. Pages are making composition of the book. So without having the pages, the book cannot exist. So this is the example of the composition. Now, human being, head, hand, leg, these are the composition of the human being. A table, the tabletop, the legs of the table, these are the composition of the table. So this is the relationship between them. So we call them the part of relationship. So association refers to the relationship between multiple objects. It refers to how the objects are related to each other and how they are using each other's functionality. So this is the global purview. Aggregation is a weak association, and association is said to be aggregation if both objects can exist independently. They are not dependent on each other for their existence. The composition is the strong type of association. An association is said to be as a composition if an object owns other object and another object cannot exist without the owner object. Okay. So this is how they are basically making a hierarchy. Association is the global purview under which we have is-a relationship and has-a relationship. Is-a relationship already we have discussed, it is the inheritance. The car is a vehicle, the bus is a vehicle, so this is the is-a relationship. Has-a relationship, there are two types of has-a relationship. One is aggregation, another is composition. Composition is also known as part of relationship. So has-a relationship when the amalgamation is less. So we can say the department has students. Department has a student. The department has a teacher. The department, so these are going to be example of the aggregation. Student, teacher, department, they are independent objects. For one particular student, the department will not change. For one particular teacher, the department will not change. So that means this is the aggregation. But composition means books, pages are part of books. The cover is a part of book. So without having the pages, without having the cover, the book cannot exist. So this is the composition. Okay. Now, for representing the relationship, we can have this type of notifications. When just association you are going to mention, so just give an line without having any arrow or anything. So that will represent the association. But you can see here the student is a class. With that, the head, hand and leg, these three classes are basically the composition of the student. So you can see how the composition is notified. This is how the can you say which object, which class is dependent on whom? Head is dependent on student or student is dependent on head? Whose existence depends on whom? Any idea? Whose existence is important?
Head.
Yes. Page. Book. Book cannot exist without a page, but page can exist without a book. So this is the composition. Got it? Okay. So this is the dependent part. This one is the dependent, and these are the independent. Now, I should not say that, no? I should say this. This is a doll. Head, hand, and leg can exist separately, and student is not dependent on other. We cannot say that. Okay, aggregation. Aggregation is student and class. Student is also independent, class is also independent. They have some kind of relationship, but if the student is changing the class, it is going from one class to another, then also the existence of the class will not hamper. Okay, so this is how we represent the aggregation. Now another concept here, meta class. Till now we discussed about the class and object. What is a class? It is the blueprint of creating an object. It is the design of the object. And what is an object? It is the instance of the class. Now, if we can have a prototype of a class, how it will be? Actually, the meta class is a concept where the instance of the meta class itself is a class. Okay. In object-oriented programming, a meta class is a class whose instances are also classes. Now, from the meta class, you can derive the class. From the class, you can derive the object. So just see this. Meta class, the class is the instance of the meta class. And objects are instance of the class. Okay. But just an ordinary class definition behavior of certain objects, a meta class defines the behavior of certain classes and their instances. Obvious, quite obvious. If the instance of a meta class is a class, obviously it has to do that. Not all object-oriented programming language supports the meta classes. Meta class is supported in Python, okay? But in Java, in C++, we don't have any meta class. Among those that do, the extent to which the meta class can override any given aspect of the class behavior, that varies. So, what are the features written in the meta class? It is not mandatory to keep them all as it is. So, you can override some part of it, but how much you can override, that will completely dependent on the...
Ma'am,
yes?
Ma'am, your voice is lagging, ma'am.
My voice is lagging.
Yes, ma'am.
So what is
Can
it?
you repeat the part?
Which part? Which part?
Ma'am, from the start. Meta class.
Meta class. Meta class is a particular type of class whose instance itself are classes. Okay. So it is a design or prototype for class. Now, obviously, all the programming languages are not having the properties of the meta class. The Python is having the concept of meta class, but C++ and Java is not having any such concept. Now, which programming languages are having the concept of the meta class? Those also vary regarding the chances of overriding the previously defined properties. So, obviously, the meta class will be having some predefined properties written inside it. That will be followed by the subclasses, not the subclasses, that will be followed by the derived classes that you are deriving or instantiating from the meta class. But all the classes may not use the same properties always. They can override some part of it. They can change some part of it. But how much changes are acceptable, that completely varies from programming language to language. Okay. For instance, in Python, the built-in type is a class name, okay? The type is the meta class. Instance of class type are themselves a class of objects. So there is a class type in Python. If you instantiate it, you are going to get 2 more classes, and those classes can be further instantiated to objects. Okay, you just get to this image, it will clarify all your doubts. So we have a meta class here. In Python, the name of the meta class is type, which you are instantiating and you are making some classes out of it. The class 1, class 2, these are the instances of type. Say from the class 1, you have OB1, OB2. These objects you are instantiating from the class 1. you are instantiating OB3 and OB4 from class 2. Okay, so this is how the concept of meta class is present. Okay, so I'm stopping here. Thank you. Just answer to the roll call.